chat. Welcome, my friends. Welcome, everyone. Ooh, this mic is going to tip over at some point. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alo Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist. Just a reminder that everything we discussed on stream today is intended to be for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. So, yeah. If you guys have a question or concern, please go see a licensed professional. I'm doing well. How are y'all, chat? How y'all doing today? Super excited to be doing an interview. I know we've been doing a lot of like Q&A and Reddit posts and lectures and things like that. So today we're going to be talking with someone from our community about burnout. So I think it's something that's increasingly affecting people. So we'd love to hear sort of one person's experience of, working at multiple jobs and stuff. Like most of our interviews, we may end up talking about something else. I think it's just kind of an open conversation to discuss whatever people feel like talking about. Sometimes we get debated, which is totally fine, right? So sometimes that happens and we just deal with that because that's life. But hopefully we'll talk about something about work and burnout and stuff like that today. So I think it's something that's really important, really relevant to our community, something that a lot of people are struggling with. And just a reminder that we do have a new careers channel on our Discord server. So as people have started to get more and more, we started to focus a little bit more on careers and sort of putting your life together. So I think as our community has started to put its life together, the ways in which we need to put our lives together are changing a little bit. So we're talking a little bit more about parenting in the last couple of months. I think we have more parents as part of our community now. As people are starting to understand themselves a little bit more, we're also starting to discuss relationships a little bit more, careers a little bit more. What are all of the aspects of becoming a healthy gamer that are important to us? And it started out with sort of having a healthy relationship with video game usage and technology usage. And so we touched on things like dopamine detox and all that good stuff. But I think just as life does, we too are evolving in terms of the way that we want to support you, the kind of support that y'all need. And so hopefully we'll have some fun today. I think that's it. I'm ready to hop in if y'all are good. I don't have much of an intro. I think we can just do it. You feel me? Okay. Good to go. So let me just make sure that this works, because sometimes this gets muted. Yo. Good. Let me just not leak things real quick. And then let me make sure. Okay. Now we're going to do this. Your full screen. No, that's my face. There's your face. Beautiful. Beautiful face. And then there we go. And they can't hear you yet because I muted you. Can you count to 10 for me, bro?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.5.
Okay.
9.
So I'm noticing a big difference depending on where you're looking.
Yeah.
So if you turn, that's fine. It's just we got to keep track of it.
Yeah.
So welcome, friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for
really appreciate it.
Deciding to come on. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And can you start by telling me what you go by?
Yeah, Matt.
Okay,
Matt's
Matt.
Fine. Yeah.
And something in particular you want to talk about today, Matt?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about burnout and I guess I can just let you know about what I've noticed.
Sure.
And then I guess you could just
Absolutely,
take it from
man.
there because I've basically experienced burnout at each of my last 3 jobs.
Okay.
And I was just it's kind of almost like a constant. It's kind of almost always there.
Okay.
Ever since the first burnout. And I'm just I started to think about it and I was I seem to be the common link here. What's
Sure.
what's going on with that? So it was really I'm interested to kind of find out if I'm somehow enabling
Sure.
burning out. So
So
that's kind of what I've noticed.
What I'm kind of hearing is maybe you're carrying the burnout with you.
Yeah.
in each of your jobs. So why don't you start by telling me what have you noticed? I think that's a great place to start, man.
I think like the main thing that I've noticed is that I've like maybe I put too much on myself.
Okay.
Like I maybe put too much responsibility on myself because like in my 2 jobs ago, like I was part of a team with like 6 other people that were on our specific team, and like myself and only one other person kind of like experienced burnout on that. And there was one thing that one of the dudes said that will always stick with me. Like I kind of wish I could have his mentality. Was like when I was talking to him about like how I was feeling, he was just sort of like, "Man, I just work here," and I was just like, "Dude, I wish I could feel like that, man."
And how do you feel instead?
Like if I don't do things, they're not going to get done. So it's kind of maybe unreasonable, but I generally feel like I am like if I don't do it, people are just going to kind of like, we'll do it tomorrow, we'll do it the next day, and then it'll just never get done.
And
so I kind of like, I got to do this, I got to do it, just get it done before the next thing comes around.
Okay, so I'm hearing that, I think you used the word responsibility. I'm hearing that you take a lot of responsibility for making sure things get done.
Yeah.
And even then, I wonder if making sure is a bit of a stretch, because it sounds like unless you do them, they're not going to get done.
Yeah, I mean, at least I feel that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm already noticing something, Matt, which is what of this attitude is a consequence of the burnout? So burnout changes us, right? So burnout affects you, and then you will change. Your experience of work will change, your thoughts will change, etc. And what part of you contributes to the burnout? So like, what's the chicken and what's the egg? Is the increasing feeling of responsibility the reason that you're burning out, or is it a consequence of you burning out? What do you think?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think I think it might be a reason for it.
Okay. So it's causing the burnout.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about, so what else have you noticed? So you put a lot of responsibility on yourself. You accept responsibility for making sure that things that are the whole team's responsibility get done. I'm sure your employers love you for that. That's not sarcastic.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like my employer, my current employer, he actively has told me, like, dude, chill.
Okay.
He's told me there was one time like a couple of weeks ago, well actually it was like a couple months ago, where I was just like on the weekend I didn't really have anything else going on. I was like, well, this thing really needs to get done, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do it, and wound up working quite a lot on it over that weekend, and then had it ready the next week, and then he like messaged me on Slack like, dude, you don't have to work on the weekends, it's all good. It's fine, man.
That's wonderful. It sounds like you have an employer who, first of all, does actually care about you and is not interested in squeezing every ounce of labor out of you that they can get.
Yeah. But that's what like that's part of why I started thinking about the entire situation, because like I've actually worked with this particular employer 2 jobs ago. He had left, and another kind of like boss came in, and that's kind of like when burnout happened again. And he was like that back then as well. But even with like a really good employer that kind of I guess I could say like supports,
yeah,
like not working yourself to death, I still like can't shake the kind of like feeling that like this stuff needs to get done, and if it doesn't get done by me, I don't know who's going to get it done.
Absolutely. So I think we can dig into that. But before we do, Matt, can you just tell me about your kind of first experience of burnout?
Yeah. So it was, like 3 jobs ago,
And how many years ago? By the way, you don't have to answer any details that you don't want to, but I'm trying to understand, is 3 jobs like 10 years or like 3 years?
6 years ago.
Okay, so 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And ballpark your age for me at that point?
24.
Okay.
And I had a baby on the way.
Oh boy.
First son on the way.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was also like my first kind of like big job, like big boy job. Like I had gone from like small marketing firms, and all of a sudden I was at this big company, and yeah, like had baby on the way, but then it was basically I was the only person in the house working, and we needed the money. So I had a friend who had a kind of like car parts like web store, and they needed a developer, and I was like, well, I could take a second thing on. So I was basically doing I was their full like single web guy, and then I was at my full-time job as well, doing my work there. And yeah, like we needed the money, so I tried to work as hard as I could to keep both employers happy. And it wound up for, I think, a little bit over a year. I was working around 19, 20 hours a day. Like literally wake up at like 6 a.m. and immediately start working on like job number 1 until around like 10, till it was time to kind of go to kind of like I guess big job. And then I would be there for however long I could, and then come straight home, start working immediately again, and work until like 2 a.m. And that was like a constant for like a year. Maybe even a little bit more.
How does it feel to say that?
Oh, horrible. So I can remember exactly how I was just exhausted, like absolutely exhausted. But it was something I needed to do. So it was like, it was kind of like, well, what can I do? I need to work. I must work.
So what is it like to be exhausted and have no choice but to work?
Hard. Pretty miserable.
What's miserable about it?
Well, I think there's a lot of kind of like miserable things about it, some of which are just like missing out on things, like whether it's family, like missing out on family and friends, or if another kind of like hard part of it is if you really, really love what you do, like it almost makes you hate what you do because you're so like restricted by it. And that's an awful feeling. Like
what I'm hearing you say is
yeah.
You started to hate what you love.
Yeah.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's definitely not very fun.
I've never heard of burnout being described that way, but I think that's actually like a very profound way to put it. Kind of thinking a little bit about medicine, where burnout is like really bad. You have a lot of people that genuinely care about patients and things like that, but then they get worked so hard, especially now during the pandemic, that they like get pushed over the limit and they start to hate that which they loved.
Yeah.
What'd you miss out on? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You want to say something?
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, my fiance is a nurse, and like when we first home and go straight to the TV and watch like medical dramas, like she loved every bit of it, and yeah, like now after I've noticed the same in her, but yeah. I think like in terms of the first burnout, I think I missed a little bit of my first son's kind of like first couple months. It kind of it continued from like during the pregnancy. I also missed out on some of the pregnancy stuff. Like my fiance is pregnant now, and it's like stuff comes up, and she's like, you you've done this before. You should know this. And I'm just like, I honestly have no memory of like of any of this, because the entire time I was just so focused on work that I honestly like can't remember anything other than like technical details of what I was working on at that time. Like I can't remember the little things that happened during pregnancy and stuff. And yeah, it's not a nice feeling.
Yeah, so I've noticed you use the phrase miserable, bad, not nice. So what I'm sort of getting is a direction and a size, but not a color, if that makes sense. Right? So I get that it's negative. I get that it's large, but I'm still struggling to understand, like, when you use the word miserable, like, there are all kinds of things that can make you miserable, right? So what is it? What did it feel like to be working 19 to 20 hours a day, missing out on pregnancy stuff, your kid's life? Like, you know, what was going through your head? What did you think about your situation?
Well, I mostly felt that I've got to figure how to figure out a way to get out of this. Yeah, it's.
So I'm hearing maybe you felt trapped.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely felt trapped. Yeah.
Do you still feel trapped now?
In a sense, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Why do you say in a sense? So I'm hearing that something about the feeling of trappedness has changed and something is still the same.
Yeah, so like in a sense, in that I still feel like a sense of responsibility to get things done. But then at the same time, it's different now, because it's almost like I said, I've got like a very supportive employer now, and it's like I now almost kind of like make myself feel burnt out by doing personal projects.
Okay.
Which is just like, to me, the most ridiculous, like what am I doing? Like, and I guess that's why I mean like, in a sense, because it's I still feel that like sense of responsibility, like I need to do something.
Yeah.
But it now it's not like it's not work.
Okay.
It's like, oh, I need to, like I did like 3 different personal projects in the last like 2 weeks.
What did you do?
I've gotten really into like sim racing, and my friend and I weren't really happy with like the current like overlays that you can do, so I wrote an app that like pulls the SDK data and then puts like an overlay over it. That was like there was like a bunch of stuff around that, and then like made a mobile app for him and I for like tracking our stats and stuff.
Wow.
And it's like for some of this stuff, it's like it already exists, so there's no reason for me to like spend time doing this. But like I feel this like need to just like do something.
Yeah,
and,
I don't think there's no reason. I think there's a very powerful reason. If we think about it logically, right? If there's an app that already exists and you build one anyway, that's not no reason. That's a really strong reason to not use what is easy.
Yeah.
So maybe we can dig into that. But this is what I'm sort of hearing from you, Matt, is that, you know, 6 years ago with a baby on the way and needing, you know, it sounds like you were the single earner in your household or family at the time. You were sort of trapped by your circumstances. Like, you're kind of in this cage of like, baby on the way, you know, I got to bring home money. Like, we have to buy diapers and nappies and cribs and this and that and food and maybe rent, mortgage, what have you. Mm-hmm. And so you were sort of like put in a cage by your circumstances. But what I'm sort of almost like subtly picking up is that your circumstances aren't the cage anymore, but you're the one who's like choosing to like build it. It's like your personal project is, let me build a cage and go sit inside.
Yeah, that's kind of like how I feel, which I don't understand at all. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all. To me, at least.
How do you feel about yourself for putting yourself or being in this situation?
I mean, a little bit frustrated.
A little bit?
Oh, yeah. Well, quite a bit frustrated.
Yeah, right.
Quite a bit frustrated.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say something that may be a little bit hurtful. Okay, so get ready, armor up.
I'm ready. All right.
Use the defend command. But so I also think about frustration as an umbrella emotion, which sometimes covers other things. And maybe what I would imagine if I were in your shoes is that I would actually like kind of loathe myself a little bit. Like kind of feel stupid. Like, why am I doing these things when there's no good reason to? Right? Like, why do I do this to myself? Why can't I stop like envying other people? Like, man, I just work here. And it's like, why can't I be like that? It's almost like there's something about you that like, you're like, I wish this was different. Being maybe even deeply unsatisfied or like kind of loathing or detesting a piece of yourself. What do you think about that?
It makes sense.
It may not be how you feel. Yeah. It's just so sometimes I've noticed, especially with like, young men that I work with, they'll use general terms like miserable or frustrated and they won't put color to them. So if the color fits, then say yes. And if it doesn't fit, if you really don't feel any of that stuff, like you don't have to feel that way,
I think I do in a way. Like I do think I feel strongly. Like I'm not quite sure how to word it because I think part of it is like a desire to like prove myself.
Yep.
In a way, and that's maybe why I like put so much effort into just like doing these ridiculous like side projects and stuff like which also to me just like does not make sense because if and I've told myself this like many times, like if I look objectively at like what I've done in like my professional career, like I should have no reason to feel like this.
Yeah. So I think I understand where I was off the mark. So I'm not actually getting self-loathing at all. So I know this is going to sound kind of weird, but what I'm hearing from you is that if it were self-loathing, it would be something that's negative, which you could heal and get rid of. It's like a bad thing about yourself, right? Oddly enough, what I'm hearing now is that you don't actually, it's not self-loathing. And in fact, if you got rid of it, you would miss out on a very, very important opportunity, right? This is not something that you want to get rid of. This is something that you want to like prove and fix and demonstrate. Like this is a problem to be solved, which once you solve it will make you feel really good about yourself as opposed to getting rid of it, which would sort of be copping out. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay. So any thoughts about that? Any reactions? You don't have to have any, but I'm just curious.
Well, just like I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think like because it absolutely like makes sense, especially with like the personal project angle and like thinking about it in the context of like picking up things to kind of like prove to myself I can do them. Just like it definitely resonates on that level. Like I guess when I think about the circumstances of like the work, the actual like kind of I guess like work related burnout, I'm just trying to think like if those circumstances were the same, but I don't think they were. I guess some of them maybe.
How did you feel after that weekend when you had finished all that work? And on Monday,
I felt great. I was so excited to show it off to everybody because it was also like there was an aspect of it that I wanted to like show to some of my coworkers because it was like a tech that we have been thinking about exploring And so I kind of I was super excited to show them about it and be like, yo, check it out, it works.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah. So it felt great.
What felt great about it?
Well, like I mean, it felt great for like all the reasons why I love being like a programmer, and why like I've always wanted to do it as a profession, like having an idea and having nothing there and then having something there. It's such a great feeling. And I mean, even if it's something boring, like you start out with nothing, you figure out a solution to the problem, and then there's something there. It's fantastic. And like I loved being able to like show, because we don't really have time during the normal work day to experiment with things. So it was like what we thought would be good was good, and it was like, oh guys, we were right.
Yeah. So here's kind of what I'm hearing there, is that you'll have like a vision of something, right? But you never know. Like, it's almost like, I imagine this is going to be kind of like a stretch of an analogy, but you're a bunch of explorers sitting at home and you're wondering what's at the other side of the ocean. Mm. And then, like, it's hard to like sail into the open waters and see what you end up with. But you guys have talked about it. You've imagined it. You've dreamed it. And then over a weekend, you go and you sail to the ends of the earth. Mm. Or you circumnavigate the globe, depending on what you believe.
Yeah.
And then you come and you tell everyone, hey, I discovered something, or I went to the uncharted waters and I built it. And this thing that we talked about, it's like a real thing now, and like I made it. It sounds like it's a lot to be proud of.
Yeah. That actually, I don't know why that reminded me of like the two jobs ago.
Tell me.
The burnout there was kind of related. I mean, in turn, like if we're talking about, I guess, like the feeling of like what we were trying to do, it was exactly that. It was like something that like we hadn't done before, and hadn't been done before, and we wanted to do it. And like unfortunately, like kind of big US company also got in there and made it happen in a very, very short amount of time, when it should have taken a very long amount of time, like hence the burnout. But the entire time I didn't feel like I was burning out.
What did you feel like?
Well, I guess excited, in a way, like excited and very, I don't know, like curious, I guess, because it's the same thing. It was like we don't know if this is going to work, like, and I just felt like I want to see it work.
Yep.
And we have this crazy deadline anyway, so why not? Like, let's get it done.
Yep.
And it was only until like after we had finished it when I realized like that I was completely like gone.
What does that mean? What does that look like? What did you realize?
I realized how exhausted I was, and how much I had, like, how much like brain power I had used and like been focusing on that after it was finished, I just could not focus on anything at all for months.
Tell me about, what do you mean you couldn't focus? What was your experience like on a day-to-day basis?
I was just looking at what I needed to do, and just exhaustion, and just kind of like, oh man, I can't.
So what would you do?
Like, I would try to work. I just would be super unproductive, like barely get anything done. And
you'd be like sitting at a computer, or like playing games, or like,
I mean, like sitting at my computer working, even like playing games. Like I didn't have the, like, I guess, mental capacity to do anything for a long while. I just felt kind of like in a haze, just like.
You're familiar with RPG mechanics?
Yes, absolutely.
So what I'm sort of hearing is that you're out of mana and you're sitting there and trying to cast a spell. And every turn
Yes.
you're just casting the spell, but nothing's coming out.
Yes, and the tank of the dungeon is still just keeps on pulling and keeps on pulling. Yeah, absolutely. I
Okay.
used to play healers. Like,
You're just not ready for the next encounter. You're
dude,
sitting there.
please,
"Ooh,
no."
I need a break. But you get up and you sit at the computer and just chain pulling out of mana.
Yeah, like, dude, please.
It's a haze. Okay. And what would your people close to you, what would they have said about you during that time? What would they have noticed?
Well, I that was like after a divorce, so I was kind of like on my own at the time. But I don't think I really talked to anybody about it actually. I guess like like coworkers during that were on the same team, like we would talk just like generally, and I mean like all of us were just exhausted, so that was kind of like
Sure.
the general, that was all we really said about it. And like, you know, jokes about the whole like timeline and stuff like that to make ourselves feel a little bit better about
What
the
would you
situation.
joke about the timeline?
We just would like have running jokes about how we started the project and we were already 2 months late, according to the, you know, the
Yeah.
producers who we had never met. It's like, so we would just kind of like joke about that, and just it's actually, I think, kind of funny because everything that we joked about was like stuff that happened before that period where we were just kind of like crunching as hard as we could. And now that I like kind of think about it and like look back on how we would talk to each other about it, it almost was like we were like reminiscing about like before
War
the project
stories.
had even started. Yeah.
Or the anticipation of the war story.
Yeah, like it was like a reminiscing about like before we started. And
I'm
like, yeah, everything we thought was like ridiculous and funny.
So I'm also wondering, Matt, if, you know, when I think a little bit about war stories, and I've worked with some veterans, they'll talk about how bad things were, but they'll also have like a subtle and fierce pride tangled up kind of in there. Do you think you guys felt that too?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't think any of us enjoyed the circumstances, but I think all like everybody involved genuinely felt very proud of like what we did and what we accomplished. And I mean, I know I do.
Yeah.
Like all of in each case that I've experienced burnout, I've still felt like, I guess, proud of what I've done, of what I had done. Just not, yeah, like just not the circumstances. Definitely did not enjoy the circumstances, but still felt proud of the outcome. And like,
And you mentioned a divorce. Once again, you're allowed to, you know, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But sometimes divorce and burnout, chain burnout, can be related. Do you think that any correlation there?
I don't think so. Especially like we all have a very good, I guess, like relationship
Sure.
like outside of it. So I don't think it was related. But yeah, it was sort of like, yeah, it was like kind of like burnout, divorce, burnout sandwich.
Yeah, right. So, like, just thinking about it a little bit, you know, scientifically. So I know, so for example, back before I did this, I would do some wellness-oriented stuff for like hospital systems and residency programs. Are you like familiar with like what residency is?
Yeah.
So there's one plastic surgery program in the United States that has an over 100% divorce rate. Right? So they also work their people very hard.
Yeah.
And to achieve an over 100% divorce rate is that's not easy to do, right? And so there's definitely, I think at that point you can safely conclude that it is not just the people in the program, right? It's like some combination of the people and the work environment. But if I'm hearing from you that you really don't think the two are related, we don't have to get into it.
Yeah.
I may, if I sniff something, I may bring it up again, but you're allowed to say, hey, I just don't want to talk about it. Do you feel okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
I hear you saying that, but from my perspective, if I take 100 people who were burnt out in job 1, divorced and burnt out in job 2, I think that some of them, maybe there's something, related. But we don't, I think there's plenty to talk about. Yeah. So let me ask you, Matt, how long have you kind of felt super responsible for stuff? Is this something that started when you started working, or, how long have you had the feeling that if I don't do things, they aren't going to get done?
Actually, I think around the time of the first kind of like job that I got burnt out at.
Okay.
At the kind of like my first like big company that I worked at.
Okay.
And if I think about it, like how I felt like when I started feeling that way, it was kind of because it was my first time kind of experiencing the like world of, I guess, large tech companies, and it was my first encounter with like I was just a lowly junior developer coming in here, fresh out of a like local marketing firm, and I felt like I was doing the job of my senior developer on my team, and I always ended up doing it, and I think that's kind of when I started feeling like, well, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done right.
So I'm going to toss some words out. They may not make sense. How does it feel being a little boy in a big boy job and doing your boss's work?
A bit annoying, a bit frustrating.
Sure. Any positive feelings?
I mean, like a little bit of, I guess like you could have like a little bit of self-pride with that, like being able to, yeah.
Like, look at how Chad you are. Like, here you are, podunk marketing firm junior dev, shows up at, as you put it, a big boy job, and is doing the work of your supervisor. Like, that's pretty Chad mode, dude.
I guess that isn't very, like, yeah, I guess that is a better way of putting it than like frustrating.
Well, I mean, just because I put it that
it's
way,
a more positive, yeah.
But I mean, but what did you feel? That's the important thing.
I think at first I did feel very good about myself.
Yeah. What did it feel like to be like a junior dev from a small company at a large tech firm? Like, you've broken into like the major leagues, right? Mm-hmm. And you're able to like hold your own or even excel.
Yeah. Yeah, like it felt good. It felt really good.
So I'm going to ask you kind of another question. And I know I'm bouncing around a lot, okay? So sorry about that. But you remember back when you told me there was that project that you did over the weekend, and come Monday, your boss was like, hey, you didn't really need to do that. Like, you don't have to work weekends. Do you have any idea how it would have felt if someone else did that project over the weekend and said, hey, this stuff that we talked about, I built it and it works? You have any way of knowing how you would have felt if someone else did that?
I think I would have felt like quite impressed, and like I can't think of like a negative feeling that I would feel.
Yeah. What would you be impressed by?
Well, like that they did it. I would be like, yo, what? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And
I
how
would
does
I
it
would feel like, yeah.
yeah, how does it feel to be the person that people are impressed by?
It feels really good. Yeah, it feels really good.
How are you feeling right now? Answering some of these questions.
A bit like I don't know how to like word it, but a bit confused and a bit kind of like fascinated.
Okay.
But I think like something that you just said really like resonated with me just now. Um, because like you were talking about how it felt when I got my first like really big company job. Uh, and just thinking about how I felt regarding like I guess like kind of seeing big tech and feeling like both a little bit proud of myself for not for being able to hold my own, but then like a little bit frustrated. I just started to think like if for example one of the developers on my team had done that project instead, I at first I thought like, well, would I be a little bit jealous that I didn't get to do it? But I don't think I would. Like I think I would be very proud of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if like I put so much responsibility on myself because I like I guess want to be the I guess like senior person that I was hoping to kind of like work with when I like first got into like tech companies. And I yeah, I think that might I had never like consciously thought of that until you
Yeah.
mentioned that and I started thinking about like how I would feel.
Well, I think it's very clear to me that you strive to be something, Matt. Not quite sure what, not quite sure why. But the one thing that I'm getting very, very strongly from you is a striving, a very powerful striving. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah.
What do you strive to be?
I mean, this is probably going to sound really, really dumb, but I feel like I honestly just strive to make things that I feel are cool.
Okay.
And that's I just want to be able to do that. Like I want to be able to if there's something that I think is really cool, I want to
Build
do
it.
it.
Yeah.
I want to build it. And if there's something that can be impactful, I want to be a part of it.
Okay. You mentioned that. So, what was your first boss like when you moved to big tech? You mentioned that maybe you wanted to be a little bit more like what you hoped your boss would have been.
Well, that's the thing. He was a great guy. He was a really, really great guy. Um all of the kind of like higher up people were actually like really, really great people. Um and I It's always, at least with tech companies, it's never like the, I guess, like lead developers or senior developers that like cause crunch. It's always like someone from outside the development team, and I think they were all very like as supportive as they could be, and they were all very like pleasant people, and I genuinely like really liked all of them. I felt terrible when I went to a new job. But it just, yeah, like.
So earlier you were connecting a couple of dots, and you said maybe you were, you thought that maybe you wanted to be the person that you. So this is very common. I see this a lot in finance, like especially investment banking and private equity, where sometimes people strive to be that which they did not have. We also see this in parents, right? I want to be the kind of parent that fixes the problems that my parents had.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does that kind of resonate at all? Like that there's something, despite the fact, because it's kind of weird, because even in your answer, I asked you, what was your boss not great at? And your answer was, my boss was awesome.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said, what was he like?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, yeah, like I guess like technical stuff.
Okay.
It's like if I ever had a technical question, like they never could answer it, and I was always the one that was telling them like how things were supposed to go.
Interesting.
And like they would be coming to me for answers and stuff. So it was like I just had kind of like wished that if I didn't know how to do something, I could ask them and I could get some sort of answer.
Yeah, but it turns out that it was the other way around. Who's wearing the big boy pants now? Yeah, Matt.
But like. Yeah, I think that like that might explain like the personal project stuff, because I hate not knowing something, and if somebody on my current team like asks me a question, like I want to always be able to give them an answer, and if I ever don't have the answer, I always like, hold on, I'm gonna figure it out for you, one sec.
Why do you hate not knowing the answer?
I don't actually know why. I guess like maybe it's like some sort of like like a little bit of like imposter syndrome or something. I don't know.
Does it feel that way? It's okay to say I don't know. You don't necessarily have to fish for a hypothesis. I'm just wondering if you have an inkling of. No, it's
maybe like an inkling of it.
I just realized I asked you, why do you hate not knowing the answer to things?
Oh man! Oh.
Was it? Would you feel anything just there? Not knowing that answer? How does it feel? I'm asking you these questions. And
it's frustrating not knowing.
What's frustrating about? Like, what? Tell me. I think we may have found the answer right here. So just tell me now, right now, in this moment.
But I don't know. I guess it makes me feel like I'm disappointed in myself for not knowing the answer, or like disappointed in not knowing like how to like how to like verbalize that,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah. So what I'm kind of hearing from you is that forget the logic for a second, but there's a part of you that like should be able to give the answer.
Mm-hmm.
You feel that way? Like if maybe you were a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more or whatever, like then you would be able to give an answer and you wouldn't have to feel this way, whatever this is. And I think you've actually done an excellent job of, I don't know exactly what you did, but you did this, which I think captures the feeling really well. Right?
Yeah.
It's like you don't have to, it's just like right there. and you wouldn't, that's the opposite of when you know the answer, right? Because then it's like a, right?
Yeah.
Right? And then it's like, boom. There's like finality. It's none of this like shaky confusion. It's like boom.
It's right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's what it is. Let me draw there's, so I get that. I think it's really, I don't know what it is. I don't know how to put it into words, but there's a certain finality to it, certainty to it, mastery of it. It's not the unknown anymore. Like the borders are drawn out. We know what the globe looks like. We know where the continents are. There's a certain like satisfaction of things sinking into place the way that it's supposed to.
Yeah.
And there's also a certain amount of like thrill or exhilaration at being the person who takes the mess and organizes it, having a goal and envisioning something and taking that vision and like making it a reality. So, I mean, I can totally get that. I'm kind of curious, Matt, any thoughts? Because I'm about to switch gears for a second, but
no, yeah, I think you nailed it on that one. Like that, especially like when you said like the word certainty for some reason just like really jumped out at me. It's a very comfortable word.
Yeah.
Whereas, not knowing something to me is uncomfortable. So it's yeah.
Do you think this aspect of your personality manifests in your personal relationships in some way?
It might. A little bit, yeah. I mean, actually, I something that a friend of mine once said that again really stuck out at me is that a lot of us like developers we can remember like the most obscure like nonsense, like tech related nonsense, but then when it comes to everything else with like life, we're pretty useless.
Yeah. One trick ponies.
Yeah. And I do actually feel quite often with just like with home stuff, with the baby stuff, not knowing in there. It's like I can't really tell you exactly what you're supposed to do in this particular like maternal situation, but if you want to know about a compiler, I got you. It's like it, and that can be really frustrating because it feels like it makes me feel like I'm letting my partner or my friends down, not being able to them.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure they don't need any tech info. Like so, when it comes to maternal info, it's like...
let me see if I heard you correctly. So I'm sort of noticing that there may be uncertainty in your personal life and there may be uncertainty in your professional life. When it comes to your professional life, you're very hungry or thirsty for like figuring that out, accomplishing it, fixing it. And sorry if this comes across as a little bit judgmental, but when it comes to your personal life, you may be a little bit disappointed in yourself, but I'm not hearing the same thirst or passion for figuring out, which diaper we need in this situation. And if anything, you can sort of rise to the challenge and even excel in a professional setting, whereas you're almost a little bit, under-leveled in your personal life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're doing you're like grinding elite mobs when it comes to professional life. And you're sitting around in the newbie zone when it comes to your personal life. Sorry if that came across as mean. It just as the words were coming out, I feel like it's maybe accurate, but it's also like kind of mean thing to say.
It's I think it's an accurate statement. Yeah. Like,
and we gotta like, no judgment, right? So I think this is like why we're here. Is like, I don't want to necessarily get into the personal life, but I think this is a common experience for a lot of people, right? So if you really think about it, when it comes to being a developer, I mean, you were practicing that for 19 to 20 hours a day 6 years ago. When it comes to our profession, a lot of times the reason we feel comfortable in it is because we've like formally trained in it. Like, you go to school, you learn how to code, you get a job, you have dedicated practice for, if you're not like you, 19 to 20 hours a day. And then when it comes to being a husband, being a fiance, being a boyfriend, being a father, like, we don't go to school for that. No one teaches us how to do that. So it's sort of like, you know, like, we've been watching all these, like, you know, videos and walkthroughs and things like that, reading wikis for figuring out how to play a healer. And then suddenly we get like moved into the tank role, and it's like, I don't know what these buttons do. Right? And I've been playing healers for the last 4 RPGs that I've played, and suddenly, like, I'm like, you know. So it sort of makes sense if you really think about it. It can come across as cool, but like cruel. But I really think it's a common experience for a reason, is that we don't get taught, you know, how to be a good romantic partner. We don't go to class for that. There's no parenting school.
So that made me like think. Do you think that could like contribute to almost like enabling a kind of like burnout path? Like, enabling, I guess, like putting too much into work as opposed to, because it like maybe it's more comfortable than departing from that.
That's a very good question, Matt. I don't know the answer, so let me ask an expert. Matt? Do you think that your difficulty and lack of understanding at home could contribute to your path of burnout at work?
I think it might. That's something I never thought about.
Can you help us understand that or explain that to us?
Well, I feel like with projects or like hobbies or something, I don't know, like maybe it's just easier to like it's easier to work on a problem, whereas at least I like feel as though maybe when it comes to like interpersonal or like things around the house and stuff like that, it's maybe a bit harder to just like hammer out, you know, figuring out what's going on.
Yeah,
it's a bit easier.
I think even in your phrasing, there's a lot of wisdom there, because even the phrase hammering out, you know, I get the sense that when you're coding and you're doing your job, there is an idea that if you put in the hours, you will get there. Like, I'm getting a strong sense of like faith or capability. But when it comes into like, you know, raising a kid, you can't grind that out, right? Like, does that sort of make sense? Like, I'm almost noticing that like, you know, if it requires 20 hours a week, easy, you'll do it. Like, that you can handle. You can grind. But there's just something about picking up groceries. Like, you can't spend like 4 extra hours and improve your performance at like picking up groceries, you know?
Yeah.
It's like a lot of stuff you can't grind out. So then like, how do you do it? Does that sort of make, and you can't practice. right? It's not like I'm going to raise this one kid to 18 years old and like learn my lessons, and then I'm going to have another one. And then I'll be better at it. But, you know, oh, there's a bug. Let me just patch it, right? Let me just code over the weekend.
There's some speed run strats to this one. Let's see.
Right? So what feels harder to you about stuff at home?
This is where I get very confused, because like I feel like it's only difficult, like just doing life stuff, because I'm always thinking about like work, or like how to improve something.
What's confusing about that? That made a lot of sense to me.
Well, like to me, it's confusing in that, like, if I know that, like, why am I not allowing myself to let go of the work part or the personal project part and focus on something else for a change?
Yeah.
It's like, why do I have, like, allow myself to like before bed think about, like, all right, how am I going to build this tomorrow? Because it doesn't, like, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, I mean, I know why I do it. It's because I feel like there isn't enough time ever to do everything that someone might want to do. And so I, like, want to try to do things fast. And so I try to, like, mentally prepare for it. But, like, it just, like, I don't understand why. Why?
Hold on a second. You this is great. You're dual boxing now. So you were saying, I don't know why I don't allow myself to, not think about programming. And then I was about to use my line, which is, I don't know either. That sounds like a great question. Let me ask Matt. And then Matt was like, well, it's because there isn't enough time to do everything. So I have to behave efficiently. So before I go to bed, if I think about the code that I have to write tomorrow, I can bang out the code that I write tomorrow. If I get the code written efficiently, then I can do my sim racing mobile app. And then I can do this, and then I can do this, and then I can do this.
And if I do that real fast, then I'll have plenty of time to do the dishes and then play some games.
There we go. Right?
Yeah.
But what ends up happening when you think about code the night before?
Well, and I don't do what I'm supposed to. I don't remember things. I'm not present.
Yeah. Right? So.
Yeah.
Well said, Matt. Well said.
Thanks.
Yeah, dropping knowledge bombs right and left, bro. So let me ask you something, Matt. What was growing up like for you?
I mean, it was good. It was good. I had great parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
can you tell me about it?
Yeah, they're two of the most two of the hardest working people that I know. And yeah, like we had a great time. Like up until like middle school or whatever, and then they got mixed in with the wrong people, and they've just sort of been like caught on the back foot ever since. So they're very hardworking people. They're still chugging along. But it was great. Yeah, like got to, like, they were very caring. They were very supportive of my brother and I. Like, my dad was like feeding me programming books. Like when I first learned how to read, he knew. And they've always been really supportive of like anything I like when I told them when you have the talk, like what do you want to be when you grow up, and I told them I wanted to be like a game developer. They were super supportive, and they've been supportive ever since. So like it was great.
Can you tell me a little bit about your brother?
Yeah, he's awesome. He's doing something that I don't think any of us really fully expected, and like he's been able to make a living out of being a musician for the past like 10 years. And like I think he had a rougher time than I did growing up, at least. And he's been able to just absolutely kill it, and he's been doing he's been doing great ever since. Like super proud of him.
Is he proud of you?
I think so, yeah.
What about your dad?
Yeah, my dad is. I think my entire family is.
So it's interesting because I asked you, to tell me a little bit about your parents, and do you know the first thing that you said about them, and mainly the main thing that you say about them?
They're caring and supportive.
Nope. You tack that on, sure.
I don't remember.
Hardest working people.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So they've been caring and supportive, very caring and supportive, right? Nurturing, fertilizing, right? Feeding you programming books, recognizing that you have a talent. So not to say that they aren't caring and supportive, but even now you kind of say they got mixed up with the wrong people. They're on the back foot. They're still working hard.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, what was them working hard when you were growing up? What did that look like?
I mean, to me it was just like normal. They would take us to their office, and we would just hang out in the office. They would work all day, then we would go home. On the whenever they didn't have work, it was also quite normal. But I think like being at their office and like being with them while they were working, and they all they worked in the entertainment industry. Like they would work we would get there super early in the morning, and we'd be there until 8, 9 o'clock in the afternoon. And they would work the entire time, like come say hey to us in the office. So I think it's actually like, I guess that kind of vision of working so much was kind of normalized for me from quite a young age.
Definitely dual boxing now. I don't even need to ask the questions at this point. So here's the question, Matt. What do you think you learned? How are you conditioned in terms of what's an appropriate work-life balance?
Yeah,
it's like
maybe
you got the answer key to the test, bro. Right?
Yeah.
But what do you think about that? What did you?
That's something I've never thought of before. Yeah, because like with them being like in the industry that they were in and everything, you never really stop working. Like there's always phone calls to make. There's always people to talk to, people to get a hold of. So you're kind of like always in this just like endless cycle of working. and there isn't really any of that kind of like I'm done now, I'm going to put that away and move on with the rest of the day.
What I'm hearing is there's no, man, I just work here.
Yeah.
You don't just work here. They bring their family to work. You bring your work home to your bed when you're laying on your pillow, closing your eyes. Right?
Mm.
The work doesn't end.
Yeah. Dang, yeah. I never I never thought like I have very fond memories of being at their office,
Sure.
and I never thought of it in like I guess like looking at my work habits now, I've never thought of that and made that connection at all. That's I mean, 'cause it makes sense. Like it absolutely makes sense.
Yeah, right. And I want to point out that I don't think things are good or bad necessarily. Right? So like even if we talk about you being burnt out, like there are lots of benefits to that. It sounds like you were able to provide a safe and stable environment for your first son because of the sacrifices that you made. It sounds like your team is able to rest easy knowing that you've got their back, that you'll be able to answer technical questions, that you'll be able to figure things out. You know, it sounds like you've done quite well for yourself and you've accomplished a lot. There's also a lot of personal pride in sense of exploring the world and I mean, metaphorically.
Yeah.
You know, like sort of like figuring out how to do things, and you derive a lot of satisfaction, and your dad was, as you put it, feeding you programming books. And, you know, so I think that, I mean, are those bad things? No. Those are wonderful things. I have a feeling that your children, too, will be anything but lazy. Maybe not.
Yeah. My son didn't get the memo for sure.
he's still young. It sounds like. I don't know. Maybe he's not. But,
Yeah, he is.
but you know, maybe you should start bringing him to work, whip him into shape.
Oh man. No, he said he wanted to be a game developer just like me, and I was like, I'm very touched, but I don't know if I want this for you, man.
Yeah, so here's the bigger question. So you say he didn't get the memo. Do you want him to get the memo?
I mean, no. I was just I was mostly talking about getting him to make his bed without throwing a fit, you know?
Did you throw a fit
no,
doing stuff like that when you were growing up?
yeah. Yeah. I absolutely did. He's a little mini me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So memo's coming.
Yeah. But like and that's like I know he's kind of, and now like especially with this like revelation about my own experience being at my parents' office, like he already had like sometimes mentions like, oh, do you have to work tonight? And yeah, like I now thinking with that kind of like connection in place, I am like it's not the nicest feeling that he knows that that's like a common enough thing that he has to ask about that.
What is that not a nice feeling?
Well, I guess maybe like a little disappointment
What are you disappointed by?
that he feels like he
Oh.
have to like work. That I feel disappointed that I've made that like a normal occurrence for him.
Yeah.
So it's like disappointment in myself for letting it kind of like go to that.
Okay, last question for you, Matt. Kind of or last thread of questions.
Yeah.
You afraid of death?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I mean, I'm. Yeah. The idea of not existing is terrifying to me. It's absolutely terrifying to me, and especially like something ever since like my son was born, I started also having, I guess, like anxiety about would be what is just like dying. Like I don't want him to have to grow up without a father. And I don't, yeah, like I don't want him to have to like grow up, without like a father, and with like having to think back about his father. And like also along those lines, I like the idea of just being gone and not having any impact is really terrifying to me.
Can you tell me a little bit about that latter one? About
Yeah,
being
like
gone and not having impact?
yeah, like not being like remembered for anything positive. Not have like just sort of, like you're here and then you're not, and not being remembered at all.
What's frightening about that?
I'm not really like I'm not sure what scares that about me. And it's something that like I've thought about a lot, and that I'm not sure like where it comes from or like why it's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like I want to have some sort of impact, and I want to
Sure.
have like some sort of positive impact. And yeah, like
You know what's going to have a positive impact? You know what's going to make you feel remembered?
what's that?
Coming in on Monday morning and having the project done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to toss something out. Is that in those moments, the pride that you feel, the satisfaction that you feel, and the certainty that you feel. Now, I'm just tossing this out, okay, so it could be wrong. Is the furthest away that you get from the terror of not having an impact in the world. Do those feelings feel like polar opposites to you?
I mean, yeah. Yeah, they do. Because like in those moments I feel like I've created something.
Absolutely. Right? It's not enough to use someone else's mobile app. That's silly. You need to
Why
make
would
your
you
own,
do that?
bro. Right? You need
Yeah.
to have your mark
Yeah.
left on the world, lest you be forgotten in the sands of time. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, like absolutely. That resonates hard. Yeah. That's yeah. Yeah.
So, you seem to be compiling. The compiler's running.
Yeah.
Let it run.
Yeah.
I mean,
Now,
say
now is
something.
now is when you tell the boss, like, hold on, I can't do anything right now. I'm waiting for it to compile. Yeah, I've had that fear for a really long time, and I did not like I don't think I would ever make that. Yeah, would have ever made that connection.
Do you think the fear predated you having kids in some way?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you remember?
So.
So these are going to be increasingly difficult questions to ask, Matt. So I'm going to just try a little bit, but chances are I think we're probably we've come a decent way today. So we'll just try to do a little bit more. But based on my experience with this kind of stuff, usually like there needs to be a break between what we've done today and what comes next. But do you have any inkling of how the first time or how young you were when this fear was present in some way?
I think during I would say like around 15, 16-ish.
Does something leap out at you about 15 or 16-ish that makes you think about that time?
Yeah, I mean, I guess around that time, I mean, the best way I can describe it is like I remember kind of like a feeling of, I guess, looking forward to something, and there's actually, yeah, something just like really jumped out at me. Core memory unlocked. I saw this video. I don't remember what game it was for. I don't remember where I saw it, how I saw it, but I remember watching of like this video about like the making of some AAA game, and there was this like interview with this dude who was saying that like he like loved playing with his little brother, so he could like point out like, hey, you see that right there? Like, I made that. And something about that stuff, like I remember seeing that and just like, yeah, I've been doing like I started doing development when I was like 10. And it was always like, I don't know. But then when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I have to be like a game developer for the rest of my life. And I want to do this. I want like one day I would like to get to like a AAA game company. And one day I'd like, at least for me, it was like, I want to have a family. I want to have kids. I want to get married. I want to have my AAA game development job. And yeah, like, weird to think, but like I've kind of checked all those boxes.
There's still one left. Big one.
Oh man.
How old is your oldest kid?
He is 6. He just turned 6.
Does he play games?
He does, actually. Yeah. Well, sometimes we let him. Yeah. He loves Minecraft, which is really wild because like I remember when Minecraft first came out, and my friend and I like whenever we were waiting for our weekend raids and we were landing it up at each other's houses, we would play Minecraft together. So it's kind of wild like seeing him play.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually like started think like he saw like a video of like Minecraft modding or like a mod for Minecraft, and he was like, whoa, what is this, like, how do you do that? And that weekend I actually learned how to make a Minecraft mod and made him one.
Yeah.
It's just like, what do you want? what do you want? And he was like, I want a TNT sword. So it was like, okay, I'll like draw me something, and then I made a little mod for him, and another side project. I'm pretty sure that mod already exists somewhere, but
so
yeah.
Answered my next question. So my question was going to be, how would it feel to one day make something, play it with your son, and say, "Hey, Daddy made this"?
Yeah, it felt really good. It felt really good.
So when you're 15 years old and you're seeing that AAA game developer telling their brother, "Hey, I made this." And so then I think the only question left is, how would it feel to have your son make something and for you to play it?
Oh, man. Oh, man. I don't know. I don't know if I could handle that. That would feel really, really, really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
So Matt, I'm gonna ask you now, so we can take a moment to breathe. I'm gonna start with this. So, you came here today to talk about burnout, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be organized, because I'll do this in a moment. But I'm just curious. What did you learn, if anything? What's your takeaway? Like, what did we talk about today? Like, how would you summarize things if you feel comfortable doing that? If you don't feel comfortable doing that, it's not a big deal. I can.
No, yeah, I think burnout is not necessarily like the main issue is not necessarily burnout, but it's more of a consequence of, I guess, personal striving to do things, to make things.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like subsequently related to a lot of different factors.
I've been keeping track. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll summarize this in a second. But is there anything in particular that jumps out to you that what are the factors that come out of this?
At least a couple in my mind are like this kind of, well, one that I've kind of, I didn't realize I had actually been kind of normalized to not stopping or not having clear boundaries in terms of like work.
Mm-hmm.
As well as just a kind of like the desire or striving to, I guess, like prove myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess like be the coworker that I've always wanted, like be able to be somebody that people can depend on.
Yep. Yeah, really well said. Can I have a moment to try to process and organize and kind of fill in some of the gaps?
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, how familiar are you with like our work, and like, are you familiar with like our content or not so much?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm pretty familiar.
So
yeah.
like, you know what karma is?
Yeah, and yeah, like I've watched quite a few of like interviews and just like the general content.
Okay.
Like a lot of like your like way older talks, like some of the earlier ones on YouTube. I watched a bunch of those as well, and like, yes, I'm quite familiar.
I'm gonna need a second to think. Can I think for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe longer than a second.
No worries.
There's just so much here and it ties together so beautifully, but it's like, you know, braiding hair. It's got to take each of the strands and figure out how to exactly kind of weave them together.
Yeah. It's like looking for a tank.
Impossible to find.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can do this. I'm tempted to bust out the iPad to try to organize the information visually. How do you feel about that?
Oh man, let's go.
Okay.
I'm way down.
I mean, we can just do, you know, verbally if you want, but let me just make sure that. Thankfully, I've got an IT person on, so I've got some. Oh shit. No. Okay. Maybe we're going to have to use like Microsoft Word or something because this just got wonky. We tried this. This is good. It gives me time to process a little bit. Okay. While I'm doing that, I have a couple of things. I do think this is a little bit... Hold on a second.
Mm-hmm. I told you it was like finding a tank.
Get wrecked. Okay, I think I figured out what the problem was. Okay, so we're going to move you over here. Got it. Okay. I'm going to put this here. Hopefully this won't lag. I'm going to screen share with you. See that?
Yep.
And I have to change my overlay.
All right.
Okay. I think we're good to go. All right. So, burnout. Okay. So, to begin with, let's try to understand what's going on with you. Okay, Matt? So the first thing to understand about burnout is that there are external factors to burnout and internal factors to burnout. I think you are a prime example of internal factors being the primary cause of your burnout. So this is not something that your job does to you. It's something that you kind of bring with you. Okay?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that there aren't external factors at play. So, for example, you may be in a competitive environment or other things like that. Obviously, you have like a work situation that causes you to crunch at times, right? So it's not that external factors aren't at play. It's just this is not what we sort of focused on today. Fair enough?
Yeah.
So I'll just put this kind of on the side. External, and then crunch in tech is a prime example, right?
Yeah.
And then you're kind of left as a zombie afterward for like months at a time. So that's absolutely a piece of it.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, what I'm noticing from you is that you kind of have this like, let me just think about what. Okay, so you know, you start out, let's say, because you came to me and you said, I'm burnt out, right? And so this is due to things like external factors like crunch. But then it also has to do with like internal factors, like, for example, extra projects. And then also things like taking responsibility at work, right?
Yeah.
And so as we look into these, what we're going to discover is that the reason that you take responsibility is like somewhat of these internal drivers. So this is kind of where we get to like, you know, this desire that like you have a genuine, you know, love for your job, right? Like you genuinely like being a programmer, like you like figuring stuff out, right?
Yeah.
So that is a piece of the burnout. It's not necessarily that we want to even get rid of it because that's what you love about your job, but it's that love for figuring things out that I think when combined with all of these other factors is leading to your burnout. So this is one thing. The second thing is the desire to impress. So I think you did a good job of articulating that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily be jealous of someone else. But I did hear you kind of say that at least you want to be a part of things, or you want to like figure things out and you want to show other people things. You want to be reliable. You want to be responsible. So all of these issues actually have to do with your ego or your ahamkar. And we'll get to this in a second. Okay. So I think that as long, and I know this sounds kind of weird, but we think about burnout as like a negative thing. But I think what is leading you to burnout is not necessarily like negative things. It's not like a toxic work environment. It is your own internal desire to like accomplish certain things. And the sacrifices that you kind of make to accomplish those things is ultimately what's, you know, a major cause of your burnout. Yeah. So the desire to impress, I think in turn, you've used some language that's kind of interesting, which is little boy, big boy. So I think at some point, and you kind of touched on imposter syndrome, which I don't know if it's imposter syndrome, but you know, you say at 24, you got your first big job at a big tech company. Your goal, your lifelong ambition at the age of 15, which is to be that person at the AAA game development studio where it crystallized. But up until the age of 24, I imagine since you were far from that goal, we didn't really get into this. You may have felt like a little boy, right? And you had enough like support from your parents and things like that, that like now you're in the big boy leagues. And so you have to like behave like a big boy. And what does a big boy do? A big boy is impressive. A big boy works 19 to 20 hours. A big boy, you know, is reliable. A big boy works on the weekend. And so there are like all these things. It's hard to kind of piece together, but like I get this sense that there's something within you that we can call it a desire to impress. But I think that there's like, you strive to be this thing, which is actually a little bit different from like the actual work itself, right? There's the love for the job, and then there's like the recognition afterward. This in turn, we'll get to in a second, is the furthest away from your fear of death. So, but that's on a side tangent. So we'll get to that in a second and how that ties in, okay? So there's this whole desire to impress and stuff like that. And then what ends up happening is like, you know, all this stuff kind of comes together, and I'm going to fill in some more up here in a second. But then you end up sort of in this scenario where you feel trapped. And part of this feeling of trapped is that, you know, you retreat into work because IRL or home life is hard. Right? And like, I'm not trying to poop on you there, but like, you know, it's like a very common scenario that people genuinely like, it's normal for humans to retreat into like what they know and what they know they're good at when facing new and evolving situations in home, like being a parent. Right. So that's a piece of it. And then we also get into the cycle that you talked about, you know, why can't I be present with, you know, why can't I be present at home? And that in turn, like, you know, why can't you be present at home also comes back to your fear of death, which we'll get to in a second. So this is going to be like the spiritual root of it.
Okay.
Which we'll get to in the end. Okay. So then you kind of feel trapped and you kind of don't know what to do. Sometimes you are genuinely burnt out. That makes it even harder. So when you burn out, so consequences of burnout are reductions in empathy. Reductions in empathy, in turn, reduce your ability to be present. And then all you're left with is grinding. Right? And so it's just hard to be at home and with your kids if you're kind of burnt out. So I don't blame you for kind of feeling that way. Now, there's a couple of other things here, because if we're talking about taking responsibility and stuff like that, you kind of mentioned this. We haven't really talked about this. So I think somewhere in here, so this is, let's say, your internal, let's say this is personality. This is ego. And then the big thing that we're kind of, this is current circumstance. and I recognize this is kind of all over the place. But then the big thing that we haven't talked about, which you mentioned, is conditioning. Right? So generally speaking, when we get burnt out, all of these things are at play. So you've been conditioned by your parents to work hard. Right? We're not blaming them. It's just you have to understand this is a part of your conditioning. So and I want to be really careful here because it sounds like your parents have been very loving and supportive. So we're not blaming them because, like, to be honest, they're teaching you the work ethic is probably responsible for you being where you are, right? So you are, you had a pregnant partner and your parents taught you a work ethic to where you were able to work for like 19 to 20 hours a day, which like provided for your firstborn child. So that's like absolutely a win, right? It just comes at a cost. So to be aware of the conditioning that you've been, it's like, it's not hardware, but it's like, that's the programming that you've been given.
Yeah.
Okay. So to sort of appreciate that. And then I think the last thing to sort of think a little bit about is this fear of death. So I don't know exactly what's going on here, but I think this is sort of the spiritual root of your burnout. So the fear of death results in not enough time. Results in impermanence. Right? There's no mark. There's no legacy. This in turn leads to making your mark. Impressing people. Right? This in turn leads to thinking about programming in bed. Which in turn leads to efficiency over presence. Right? This in turn leads to striving instead of accepting who you are. You need to be more, right? Always need to be more. You impress people at the last job, now you got to impress people this time around. Now, some of this stuff may relate to, we didn't really talk too much about this. It sounds like your parents were very, very supportive of you. But sometimes, that desire to impress can also be like due to parental approval and things like that, a little bit unclear. But I think it kind of comes back to this fear of death. And this is why, like, you're about like DPS rotations. Like, it's not about enjoying the encounter, right? You don't care about like, oh, look at how cool this boss is and like, wow, this fight is so much fun. It's like, how do I grind this boss and get my loot and get my gear? And so like what happens, and this happens when people who play MMOs, is like they play the game for the grind, not for like the enjoyment of the game. It's very different from like a single player RPG where there's like no grind, right? So, and if you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I be more present at home? Like you have to understand that you've traded that presence for efficiency. And this is where like all of your projects come in, right? Even your personal projects. And even then, some of these personal projects, like building your own mobile app, loop back around and deal with your sense of impermanence because you've built this app. You built this game. You built this mod that your son will remember, right? And then like you're terrified of like being like, first of all, not being present. And then secondly, like you want to be remembered in the right way, but you don't want to be remembered at all, actually, because you want to be there and continually be there, right? So that sort of makes sense. But does this making sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So now the question becomes, what do you do about this? Okay, so the first thing, we're going to start with conditioning. Questions so far?
No, I'm like kind of in awe at there's so many things that kind of came up that I did not expect would be related, and I'm kind of like just a bit mind blown that how it all works together.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know but I mean it's like a piece of code, right? Like you have 1,000 individual lines, which when they come together produce something. And that thing very necessarily is the consequence of every one of those 1,000 lines of code. A human being is no different. Right? So, first thing to do about conditioning is just to understand it. And understand that a lot of what your mind has been defaulted to do, right? So like you've been taught a certain work ethic meta based on your upbringing. And so you're going to play within that meta. And that meta is good at certain things and bad at other things. So just be aware that this is the meta and that it's going to take some time to play in a different kind of meta. So how do you be more present? How do you do the dishes? Like, you know, all these kinds of things are going to kind of like, you know, you're operating within this meta. I don't know how else to put it. So just an appreciation that you are not operating in fact, but in a meta will be the first step to reversing this. Okay? So like that's number one. Second thing is ego. Okay. So you have to recognize that on a weekend, so here's what's going to happen. The weekend rolls around. And you're going to have some combination of love of programming. Oh, isn't this such a cool thing to explore to figure out how to program it? Plus, desire to impress equals, daddy, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to sucker punch you here. Do you have to work? This is a sucker punch.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, that's a rough one.
Yep. Right. So there's a lot of love for you, Matt, but the sucker punch is important. It's an important part to motivate you. Okay. So I say that with love. So here's the thing. The love of programming is about solving the problem. This is doing it over the weekend. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
The time element comes from here and also the fear of death. So I'm not saying change this. By all means, solve the problem. But ask yourself on the weekend, like, why do I need to do it this weekend? Why do I need to roll in on Monday morning and have it done? And this is where you start off by saying, well, no one else is going to do it over the weekend. And like, yeah, and that's okay. Right? So now we get to the hardest thing. Don't worry, conquering your fear of death is going to be easier than this. Even though the fear of death is the foundation of all your problems from a spiritual perspective. Okay? Yeah. You gotta I don't even know how to say this. Okay, this is gonna be terrifying. You gotta let things not get done or be screwed up. Okay? This is like anti-perfectionism. So this is one of your biggest strengths, but is creating the situation that you have here, which is that you take too much responsibility. So the question that I have for you, or the one that I want you to ask yourself, is if you do this and it doesn't get done, what is the consequence? What is the price I am paying for this consequence? Like, am I paying this price? And I know it's kind of weird, but this is where detachment comes in. Right? Where it's like, it's okay for it to not get done, especially over a weekend. And like this, I think is going to be very hard for you because it's very anti the way you've worked so far. So, you know, you've been, so it's like very off meta for you. But the key thing is like this, right? Because this is the price that you pay. Is like you end up working too much, you're not present, you don't do the dishes, you're exhausted. And so, like, it's going to be hard for you because you're going to have to sort of let things fail, which especially if they're not your responsibility, it's like someone else's responsibility to take care of it. And like, they're going to do their, I mean, hopefully they'll do their job too. And if they don't do their job, let them ask for your help by all means. But I think this is going to be tough, but you've got to cultivate some amount of detachment. And that detachment is going to come through sort of like appreciating, okay, like when you want to work on this weekend or you want to like do this tomorrow, you know, what would be the consequence if you didn't do that? Well, I'll be less efficient. Okay, so like what's wrong with that? So kind of like play that tape through to the end. And you may find on a given day that you are not willing to pay the price of inefficiency and that you are choosing work over spending time with your kids. And I know it sounds weird, but that's okay too. It's not the worst thing in the world to teach your kids that sometimes you have to work in the evening, right? It's like, it's correlated with worldly success. So your child is less likely to be broke, right? But you also want to recognize that teaching your kid and modeling a proper work ethic is really healthy for them. But also, like, do you want your kid to have 4 jobs and be perpetually burnt out? And if the answer to that question is no, for the sake of your sons, it sounds like you've got 2 boys.
One on the way, we don't know what it is.
Okay. So for the sake of your son, you also need to teach him how to be present, right? Yeah. How to, it's just as important for you to be working and your kid to come in and say, Daddy, do you have to work today? And for you to turn to him and say, you know, I should work, but I'm not going to. What do you want to do? Right? Those are just as important. So I want you to start thinking about some of those things. Mm-hmm. Last thing is the fear of death. So I don't know where you got this fear of death. You know, it may have happened early in your life. I think there's more exploring to be done from here on forward about this core fear you have, about this exploration this experience that you had when you were 15 years old. I think a lot of stuff, there's like, we're just getting started, bro. Where, you know, this idea of like making that mod for your child, having your child make a Minecraft mod and like how much pride you're going to feel. So there's a couple of different things. This is where things get tricky, but I'm going to go ahead and say there's 2 ways to deal with this fear of death. One is you figure out where it comes from. It comes from an experience where you discovered that time was limited. You're not going to be around forever, or you won't be remembered. So this could be an experience where you were forgotten and you got hurt so bad from this that your mind was like, never again. No one ain't ever going to forget us ever again. F that. Right? Or it's time is running out, where you sort of like understood viscerally and deep in your psyche that like time is limited. So I don't know exactly where that's going to come from, but you can kind of like look for that. But what I'm going to say, I'm going to err on the side of assuming that this is not a psychological consequence of a past experience. Do you know what a samskar is?
I do not. No.
Okay. It's like a trauma or something like that. Let's not worry about that. But I'm going to just go ahead and call this an incomplete karma.
Okay.
So for some people that I've worked with that have a fear of death, they're like, and this is a more spiritual perspective that some people may not believe in, which is totally fine. It's just use what works for you. There's plenty here that's not spiritual. But to be complete, right? So because I do genuinely find this to be very helpful for some people. Some people, according to this like ancient theory of karma, are born with like a particular incomplete karma. And you cannot like rest or relax or be present in life until that karma is complete. And once that karma is complete, it's like your job is done and then you can chill. And the thought of dying before that work is undone feels incredibly terrifying. So this could be the kind of thing where like, and I know it sounds kind of weird, but when I talk to people who have incomplete karmas, they have experiences like you have that are bizarre, not very logical, but profound. And so a good example of this is watching an advertisement or trailer or something about a game developer showing their brother the game that they developed. That is not a life-altering experience, right? By any objective sense. But for you, it was like profound and shaped your life. And the most powerful moment that we've had that I've seen you share today is like modding a TNT for your kid.
Yeah.
And that's what incomplete karma is. So I think like, I don't know what that is, but psychologically, like whatever the F happened there is what I would call an incomplete karma. So what I would encourage you to do is by all means, build that game that you want your child to play. By all means, support your child in building the game that you are one day going to play. So move towards that, but also have some degree of like patience and understanding that like this is a long-term investment, right? That your child may discover that he doesn't want to be a programmer and that the fulfillment of that karma is also going to be like not entirely logical. But that essentially you have some kind of work to do in this life. But also have a little bit of faith that there's a lot of factors, all of these, that are conspiring to get this karma complete in this life. So that's not something that you really need to stress about because it'll happen. And it's hard for you to understand that. But just as someone who's been playing around with this crap for a couple of years now, like you're teed up for it, right? Like your spawn was designed to have this thing come to fruition. So maybe that's going to involve cultivating a certain amount of presence, which I think it does, but it'll happen. So just relax a little bit. And at the, yeah. I mean, I could say more, but I'm just going to go and stop there. Questions?
Yeah, one thing that kind of popped up was the kind of anti-perfectionism and like letting things not get done. I guess this might be like a dumb question. I don't know. But like in terms of working on things for fun, like I guess I still like don't understand how you this might, like, some people are probably like, oh, this is so easy, man, just don't care. But like how do you still kind of like explore working on like what you love to work, but not, I guess, put so much emphasis on it? I don't know if that's like the right way to put it, but like in a healthy way as opposed to an unhealthy way, or like a kind of like more toxic way.
Yeah. So good news, Matt, is I've got a really good answer for you. The problem is the answer is not going to come from me, but it turns out we have an expert on the subject.
Oh no.
Here with us today. So may I introduce you to Matt? Matt's a AAA game developer who's been working on developing a work-life balance. And Matt, what would you have to say to Matt, who's trying to figure out how do you find the balance between pursuing personal projects and like also like setting a limit so that you don't burn out? What do you think, Matt? Give me your instinct.
I mean, I guess I just keep telling myself it doesn't have to be done today.
So I think that's
It's not important.
But like, does it have to be done today?
No, it doesn't.
Really?
I don't think it does.
Okay, so let's so there you go, right? So here I am. I'm playing the role of Matt, and you're playing the role of advisor of Matt, but I'm saying to you, doesn't it need to be done today? And what do you say?
No, it does not.
So I think what it comes down to, Matt, is a choice, right? Mm-hmm. It could be done today. There's a lot of advantages for it being done today. Like, you can develop this app, and then you guys can do your sim racing even better. You can make this thing for your son, and then he'll have a modded thing in Minecraft. And like, one of those projects like absolutely has to be done today, right? Like, for sure. Like, yeah, like let me mod this thing in Minecraft. So I don't want you to think about it being needing to be done today or not being done today, but think about it like a choice, right? You've got 100 gold pieces. It's your choice how you spend it. And just understand that whatever choice you make is going to come with a particular cost, an opportunity cost. Mm-hmm. So if you stay up today, if you spend your entire Saturday, like, you know, working on this mobile app, or it's like the evening and you want to work on this mobile app, like, would it be cool to build it? Absolutely. Would it be impressive? Absolutely. Would you be remembered? Absolutely. Would it nullify your fear of death a little bit? Absolutely. Right? That's why you do it. Like, you don't... And remember, at the very beginning of this conversation, I said you don't have no reason. In fact, quite the opposite. You have a very powerful reason. And you appear to have a crippling fear of death and impermanence and not being remembered, which drives you to strive, excel, be noticed, and impress people. Right? That's a damn good reason. So, and I think it just comes down to a choice. And I think the more that you understand that, like, this is an opportunity cost, and I know it sounds kind of weird, but at the end of conversations like this, people think that you're going to now spend all these quality weekends with your kid. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. You're going to fall into these. Just understanding the powerful driver does not give you automatic control over it. Mm-hmm. All we're doing is just detecting the invisible mob. You still have to take it down. So far, the problem has been that you're fighting something that's invisible, so you can't even target it. Every round, you've got nothing to target, and it's just beating the crap out of you. So it'll be slow, but just recognize that you've got a choice. And this is where I'd really be careful. I think the way that you're going to slip up is this idea of efficiency. What's really going to screw you is efficiency. Because you're trying to do more in less time. Which, like, even if you're efficient, it's still excessive.
Yeah.
So be careful, because and this is where you have to say to yourself, yes, it would be efficient for me to spend tonight thinking about how I'm going to code tomorrow. But, you know, I have a fiance.
Yeah.
And I could spend that time doing something else. And then that part of you is going to be like, well, if you spend like an evening with your fiance, like no one is going to be impressed. No one is, you know, but that's okay. Right. And over time, I think as you start to like play with these feelings and like engage with them some, you'll move in the right direction.
Okay. Yeah.
And like like wise Matt said, you don't have to do it today. So better answer than whatever random combination of shit I threw at you just now.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I'll practice telling myself that.
Yeah. Right. So but it's not so much about telling yourself. I know it sounds kind of weird, but ask yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Just don't just autopilot the meta. That's your biggest problem.
Yeah.
And then as you start to question, you'll make the right choices, right? It's just about critical thinking, which I'm sure you understand as a programmer. Like, you don't want to operate on autopilot. The right answer, especially for someone like you, will float to the surface for you, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a meditation recommendation for you.
Okay.
I think the challenge is that I do not have, this is the right meditation for you 100%. I just can't do it with you right now on stream, but I'm going to go ahead and recommend it to you anyway. And apologies to everyone else, but we're going to have to figure out how to do this on stream. So maybe I'll try to prep for this one day. Do you know anything about mandalas? Have you ever heard that term?
What? I feel like I've heard of it, but it's not.
Yeah. So like this is where you basically, there are a lot of meditation techniques that are around impermanence. So they involve making something, and that's very difficult, and then destroying it. So a mandala is like where you take, for example, like colored rice and you make an image. And the thing is, when we tend to do creative work, we want to store our creative energy, right? So we like paint it. Like if we make a painting, we frame the painting and we keep it. So there's like an attachment to the efforts that and then we like build stuff up. So the idea of a mandala is that you invest some amount of time and creative energy and then actually like wipe it clean. So other examples of this are like, so there's also like Zen gardens, which involve like, you know, sand, and you'll make patterns in the sand and then you wipe it clean. It's basically like a chalkboard. So making like really great chalkboard art is another example of this, but I think there's something specific about the mandala practice, which is different enough from other things to where it tends to anchor people. And so I would encourage you to like make a mandala and like see how you feel at the end of it and then destroy it. And then see how you feel at the end of it. And my hope would be that what you'll do is essentially like do reps with the muscle of your mind that fears impermanence and needs to leave its mark. Right? Because there's a part of you that's going to say like, I don't want to destroy it. This feels like a waste of time. Oh, it's inefficient. Oh, interesting. You do not need efficiency to dictate your actions.
Okay.
It's also something you can do with your kid. 6-year-olds are great at mandalas.
Yeah, I can imagine. He's very good at drawing something and then just like, nope.
Yeah. So you know, and how do you feel when he does that?
Well, if it's a really, really good one, it's always just like, no, man, why'd you do that? Like, I wanted it. Like,
exactly, right? So there's that attachment.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe you can learn a thing or two from your son, which I'm sure you've already discovered you're planning to learn from him. But
yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll definitely look into that. It sounds
Yeah.
interesting. It sounds difficult, but it definitely
Yep.
sounds interesting.
Also has the added advantage. So I think you're someone who's very project oriented, right? So I think that
Yeah.
if I told you to sit and breathe, I'm sure that would help you. But for someone as tactile and creative as you, I think a mandala is actually the right recommendation because it involves like doing stuff with your hands. Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
No, I think like you brought everything up. Like, yeah, I'm still like processing a bit.
Totally fine.
The all the different connections and stuff. Like, I just did not. I don't think I would have ever. I wouldn't have come to the conclusion or like even make those connections.
Sure.
So thank you, thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome. So I know that we normally don't charge anything for these sessions, right? But today I'm tempted to make an exception. And if you want to pay us in beta keys for whatever AAA game you're working on, if you wanted to, I'm just saying. No, I'm kidding. You don't have to do that. That was a joke. I recognize now that you may feel obligated, but maybe for chat, if you wanted to do a beta key giveaway at some point, if you felt like it, no obligation. No, but
See what I can do.
Matt, it's been awesome having you on, man. I know it's a lot to process. You may find in the light of tomorrow that some of it sticks, some of it doesn't. Totally fine, man. You know, and so just take what resonates and sort of play around with it. And I think you're on a good track. And the good news about your burnout is that I think you are going to have a hand in shaping your future. So I'm really optimistic for you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you again. Thank you so much. Like,
you're welcome, bro.
Really, really appreciate it.
All right, man. Take care.
It was really fun. See ya.
All righty. That was good. Beta keys. Yeah. So it's fun to do interviews, right? You never know. Like so with burnout, like you never know what's going on. So here's what I would say about burnout. So I think that as people are getting increasingly burnt out, I think there's a very good reason why we attribute burnout to external circumstances. So we'll say like, okay, I feel burnt out at my last 4 jobs. It must be my job's fault. And even the original research on burnout, when Maslow, I think Maslow was one of the original people, could be misattributing a quote here. So apologies if I'm, not giving someone the appropriate credit. But when Maslow was doing the original research on burnout and presented something called the burnout syndrome, the psychiatric and psychological community responded with, this sounds like depression. And Maslow's main response was, well, depression tends to be more internal and potentially more organic, whereas burnout is the reason I'm defining it separately is because it appears to be related to the job. So it has a strong external factor. And so as a result, the consequence has been that burnout research focuses on external things. So the reason we're burnt out is because of things at work. Now that appears to be quite true in a lot of ways. And I think we heard from Matt today that burnout results in hating something that you love, which I think is the best example or best way to encapsulate burnout I've actually ever heard. Dude was really lit today. It was great. The interesting thing about today's interview is that I do think that as burnout has started to focus on work-related stuff, we have paradoxically lost sight of internal factors that drive us towards burnout. And what I tend to see in most of the people that I've worked with is that there is an internal vulnerability that is oftentimes exploited by a work environment. So it is my own, for example, desire to be impressive. It is my own desire to be a team player and be perceived as a team player. It is my own drive that I want to work with people like I'm nice to people at work. I want my work to be like family, right? I want to have friends at work. I want to have all these relationships at work. I want my boss to be my mentor. That then exposes us to being taken advantage of in particular work situations. So I think if y'all are burnt out, like this is a great example of how, there's going to be internal drivers to it as well. And if you really want to conquer burnout, it's going to be a combination of understanding your internal drivers as well as external contributions. And the two are going to go kind of hand in hand. And the good news is that you can work on either front, and therefore you can ultimately get higher yield by approaching it from both sides. Right? Who are we rating, chat? Last thing about the mandala. So I know it's hard because I can't do one here, but the reason I recommended that, I know we like to meditate together, but I don't want the meditation recommendations that we offer to be just limited by what we can do on stream. So if you are someone who is concerned about inefficiency, and efficiency is your slave driver, if you are someone who has a fear of death or wasting time or things like that, those two tend to go pretty hand in hand. Or if you're someone who's very tactile and likes to build things, there's a set of meditations that are around that kind of stuff. So a good example of these meditations are mandala is one example. Other examples are arranging rock formations. So that's another very awesome. So if you've got ADHD, this is a really good tactile meditation where, you try to stack rocks as high as you can in some random place, like in a national park or something like that. And it's kind of cool because you're not necessarily, the goal isn't to destroy it. The goal is actually to leave it there and have other people appreciate it, but not to take credit from it, to have no ego, to put effort into something in the world, to create something and walk away without asking for nothing in return. And so that's sort of what, these are a couple of good meditations that we'll figure out how to, we'll figure out some way to teach you all this stuff or do it together. But that's what I would really recommend. Okay, if it's illegal in a national park, then don't do it. Right? But rock stacking is fantastic for ADHD. It's really good. Okay, so we're going to raid Wook's solo. And we'll see y'all, what is today? Wednesday? We'll see y'all on Friday. So hope y'all enjoyed that. If you're burnt out, maybe it was a little bit different from what we were expecting, but that's what I love about community interviews. So you never know quite what you're going to get, but most of the time what we get is pretty amazing. So huge shout out to Matt. Turned out to be quite the expert, and we'll see y'all on Friday.